Hi, this is Morgan, and I'm the head botanist owner of Abbott Botanical Assessments. Our business is located in Orem, Utah. I am a graduate of UVU, Utah Valley University. I've got a bachelor's in botany, and I've worked in this field for about 5 years now. My background is within field botany, which means that I identify wild plants on different kinds of property. This can include federal land like BLM land, state land, private property. I've worked for universities, the federal and state government, and various nonprofits. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about ecosystems and plant identification, seeing patterns in nature. And what that means is that we're going to go over plant identification, and we're going to go over ecosystems and connect that to how you can manage your own gardens, start seeing patterns in your own yards, ask these questions, learn how to ask questions like, why is this plant growing here? Why aren't my tomatoes doing well? Why aren't my plants doing well? And I hope that's what you're going to get from this presentation. So let's go ahead and start. So what I like to start with is, let's go ahead and name this plant. I'm going to give you guys a second to take a wild guess at what it is. So for those of you who don't know what this plant is, it's a dandelion. So the big question we like to ask is, how do you know this plant is what you say it is? There's this thing called plant blindness in the majority of our community, especially in the West, especially in Utah. There's a lot of people who wonder what plants are. And we call this, like I said, plant blindness. People just don't recognize that there's different types of plants. I take it as my personal mission to solve this. But the real question is, how do you know this is a dandelion? You probably will say, oh, it's dandelion because of the way it is. So I'm going to show you guys this quick video. I'm going to start it now.
Tell that it's an aspen tree because the way it is.
Okay, so if you guys couldn't hear that, he goes up to an aspen. He says, wow, what a beaut. This is an aspen. And I can tell it's an aspen because of the way it is, which isn't super helpful when you don't know what an aspen looks like, right? So the process that we like to, the process of plant identification is examining physical characteristics of a plant to determine its classification. I'm going to discuss this more in like another video where we specifically go over how to key out plants and how to look at specific characteristics to decide where does this plant belong. Humans like to classify things, so we're going to get to that in another video. But in this case, we don't, you learn to start seeing these plants. After a while, you start recognizing, oh, well, this has a certain branching pattern. This bark, this type of plant has, white bark. Why is this significant? So it's just, you start learning this process of how to identify plants. One of the ways that we do this is through using keys, like this grass. So I should preface this by saying, like I said, I'm from Utah, and I mostly work in the Great Basin, like ecosystem. So most of my keys and like most of my examples are going to be about that because that's what I know the most about. So these are pretty good examples if you're interested in learning about Great Basin plants. So we have these keys. The one I have listed here is Grasses of the Intermountain Region. It's a really great book. Love it. Highly recommend if you're interested in learning about grasses. It's really in depth. It goes into so keys specifically go into like the little tiny bits of a plant that, you would need probably a microscope for, especially for grasses. Now, and then we have guides like Weeds of the West that are just kind of like general descriptions, and I have some like macro photos of like general leaf shapes, flowers, things like that, kind of like what its habit looks like or how it grows. We also take photos. This is a photo on the Spanish Fork River Trail of a golden currant. And that's super helpful when you're trying to determine what something is and you can't pick it because it was on a nature trail and I already knew what it was. I just took a picture. But for people who, you're in let's say you're in a national park and you can't pick the plants. Great option is just take a photo and bring it to somebody you know. And when you do that, you definitely want to use some kind of item for scale. I normally wear rings or jewelry, and I know what size those are. Sometimes I even use a shoe because you don't know how big a plant is, depending on how where you take the picture from. It could look way bigger than it is or way smaller. A penny or like a quarter or a coin is like a really good example of using an item for scale. You can also like carry around like paper rulers. Some people like to do that. I don't. I just use things. Sometimes I use my hands because I know how big my hands are. And these are just things you start to learn over time. And then so if you're in the field and you're trying to determine like the species of a grass or determine like what the hairs are on a plant, you'd use this thing called a hand lens or a loop. I've got a fancy one here. This is the one I use in the field. It's just an LED loop. It's also got ultraviolet on it, so I can see if like it's a certain species of sagebrush. Pretty helpful. And then the other thing you can use, I use this picture as an example of like an app that's available if you don't know anybody who is, a botanist or somebody who's an avid plant person. That's a pretty good option if you're in a situation like that. Just post it online or use that. Sometimes I even use them. iNaturalist is a great example of that. So one of the we've got a lot of techniques we use. I like to say that we use all of our senses to be botanists. So we use touch, smell, eyes, taste sometimes. We've got a good idea of like what kind of plant it is and that it's not going to poison us. I generally do not recommend doing that unless you know what you're looking at. You want to make 100% sure that you're not going to eat something poisonous and accidentally hurt yourself or somebody you care about. Just generally don't eat plants in the wild unless you know what they are. But in general, like you can, if you don't have, let's say you don't have like a loop on like this on hand, sometimes you can just like feel the plant and see if it's got some hairs on it or it leaves like a residue. And that's a really great indicator for some plants. And then other times, you smell. So like this guy over here was rolling a piece of leaf in his hand to see if it had a distinct smell. We're trying to figure out what family this plant was in. I believe we decided it was Lycium. It's not Andersonii. It's another it's a wolfberry of some kind. So these are all the ways that we can, learn how to identify plants. And these are skills that you build up over time. It's not something that comes overnight. You build up these techniques over time. My friends and I like to joke, my botany friends and I like to joke that like we hold our hands up to our nose and say, do you even botanize? Because you just use all of your senses to identify plants. So the other thing we look at too when we identify plants is, like I said, we look at physical characteristics. So for the next section, so we're back to this dandelion, and we look at the physical characteristics of this dandelion. What pop out to you? Generally, it's a yellow flower. Dandelions are very showy. They like to show off. You have some leaves clustered around the base, and those are called basal leaves. They're clustered near the ground. The leaves tend to be like spade-shaped, wavy, and regular. And then the other big indicator of this is a hollow, milky stem. Now, in my my speaker's notes, I've got about, I would say, 4 paragraphs describing every single aspect of a dandelion, and that's just from the Illinois Wildflower info spreadsheet for dandelions. I'm just going to read you a section just to kind of describe how much information we look at when we do identify a plant. So this is discussing its basal leaves. The basal leaves are individually up to 10 inches long and 2.5 inches across. The basal leaf is broader towards its outer tip than at the base, obsculanceolate in outline, although it's more or less lobed, pinnatophyid, along its length. These lobes are triangular. The margins are slightly wavy and irregular and sometimes coarsely dentate. Now, this goes on for a while, just describing it, and these are the kind of things that you look at in a key. But in general, just like writing out general characteristics that you see and recognizing, these leaves are a certain shape, or they're, alternate or opposite. What color is not like a good indicator for a plant, but at the beginning, that's something that you do learn, is that like, oh, if it's a composite, so this is a composite plant or a composite flower. We call those damn yellow composites because they're kind of hard to key out. There's a lot of them, but you generally just go in and you just, look at all these characteristics that you're learning to see. So, I mean, I like to joke that botanists have about 100 different types of words for hairs. And we really take those into account too. So it's just building up these skills and seeing how you can describe a plant or how you can describe the way a plant looks, and then building that in your memory. And we already do that with dandelions. Because we all grew up around dandelions and we, are familiar with kind of how weedy they are and how they mess up people's lawns. So that's one plant that's kind of exempt from our plant blindness, at least here in Utah, is recognizing what a dandelion is and how it looks like. And it's got a lot of, siblings and cousins that look pretty similar, and they're a little bit different. Like salsify is one. People think that's a giant dandelion. It's not. It's in the same tribe, but it's not a dandelion at all. So now we are going to move on to ecosystems. So a good definition of an ecosystem is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. And this includes biotic and abiotic factors. When I say biotic and abiotic, that just means that, that just means that we are looking at living and non-living factors. So some examples of non-living factors would be water, rocks, minerals. You could argue that it's soil. Soil can be considered a living thing, but I mean, if you take apart its living bits, or like leave them out, you could count soil as one. Biotic would be the trees and the animals that live in the water or around the water, the grass, the sagebrush back there, and all the trees that are up here. So this is an ecosystem. So now we're going to go over, what we can learn from plants and their ecosystem. So this is what I like to think of as thinking like a botanist. In my job, we trying to figure out, where does this water flow? Is this area over or undergrazed? Does this area require prescribed burning? How can we manage invasive and native species? And is there too much disturbance for this area? As you build up these skills, you start saying, okay, well, we can expect to see certain plants here and not certain plants here. And if certain plants, like if there's tamarisk somewhere, that there's going to be water and there's probably going to be some erosion and some high traffic. Or like with cheatgrass, probably overgrazed. Same with prickly pear or, other, I wouldn't say undesirable plants, but plants that aren't conducive to grazing. So you start picking up these things, and how it can impact a healthy ecosystem. So why does this matter? There's a lot of reasons why it matters. I mean, as a botanist, I think I've got a lot of opinions on why it matters. But the primary reason for the federal and state governments is to manage grazing. We also want to document plants that are invasive, rare, endemic, and endangered. That helps us manage like BLM, because BLM is multi-use. All different types of people can use BLM land. Everybody can use it. So you have to make sure what I like to joke is that we like to make sure everybody's unhappy, because if everybody's unhappy, nobody's like winning in that situation. So like, I mean, I may not be thrilled about certain grazing things, but they can't graze in certain areas because of an endemic plant. Same with, motorcycles or dirt bikes. I grew up doing that. Now I'm like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have dirt bikes here. But they have dirt bikes there because it's a multi-use area. So, if everybody's not thrilled about something, it's usually a good thing. Means nobody's like really succeeding in what they want. But, the main thing is to like in enjoyment. I mean, have you guys ever walked through a huge field of cheatgrass? It's miserable. Nobody likes that. It's really unpleasant to hike in. It's not very pretty. And it's a huge fire hazard. And the other thing is community engagement. So we want to make, like I said earlier, most botanists want to cure plant blindness. And by curing plant blindness, that would be, getting the community involved. We want kids to keep asking these questions throughout their whole lives. Why does this plant, like, we want kids to keep, and adults to keep asking why something's here. We don't. So why does this matter? So a big part of our job as botanists, the majority of where our pay comes from, is from helping state and federal governments manage grazing. Grazing is a big part of the Utah economy. Surprisingly, I don't think most people realize that most cattle start their calves here and they feed on them. I believe it's during the spring and the summer, get them fat and then send them to feedlots as they get older. So Utah is a big starting ground for the cattle industry because we have a lot of grazing land. The other part of our job is to document plants that are invasive, rare, endemic, and endangered. Invasive plants can include cheatgrass. Cheatgrass is probably the biggest one. We like to map it out because it's a huge fire hazard. We've got these big swaths of land that are just cheatgrass forests. There's nothing else growing there. It crowds everything else out. There's no, native grasses. It's just not. It's not a good plant. We don't really like saying that a plant's bad or a plant's whatever. But it's a relatively dangerous plant just because if you have like one little spark, it can start a huge wildfire that can decimate ecosystems, even ones that aren't affected by cheatgrass yet because it moves in right after a fire. The next part is looking at rare plants. We do have a lot of rare plants in Utah. One of them is the dwarf bear poppy. That is down in St. George area. It's a really gorgeous poppy. But there's, I believe I was talking to a friend who works there, and I believe it's less than 1,000 individual plants in a single area. And then there's another population that's got a few more, but it's very rapidly declining because of development. The other bit is that we do have some plants that are only local to certain microclimates in Utah. We have some really interesting soils. And that means that certain plants can only grow in those soils that are only found in Utah. And we want to document those because we don't know if they've been documented before or in this certain location, or if it's we want to see the community change. And then the other thing we're looking for too is endangered plants. If we document these when we're looking at plots just because we're trying to get an idea of how the ecosystem works. These are all pieces of the puzzle that help us do our jobs and to determine, okay, what can we do grazing here? Can we let people just come in and, ride dirt bikes here? Can they come and shoot? Can they come hike? Can they come do all sorts of different things? And that's part of our job is to just, push out data and get that information and put it online and make sure it's available for people who do this kind of research and make these kind of decisions. And it's an important job. We depend on our food, our meat. We depend on the what is the word I'm looking for? We depend on the ecotourism that happens in this, in our state. And this helps us, map these populations and figure out what's there. And it's also just super cool to see like a rare plant that you've never seen before in a certain area. You're like, oh my goodness, I've only seen that in a book. I have never seen that in real life. And it's such a cool moment when that happens. The other responsibilities botanists have, and that, we all have, is to ensure enjoyment of this area. So let's say we've got this issue with cheatgrass. We can dedicate that plot to just, being for recreation. We can have dirt bikes and like high disturbance activities there instead, because it's not really going to change anything. If that's there, we can say, okay, well, this area is a bit more sensitive because these plants are here. So we are going to limit to just, maybe horses and hikers, limit, certain things from getting, just because if you mess with like soil crust and things, sometimes plants don't adjust well to change. I'm sure you guys all have plants, house plants that, if you move just a couple inches one way, they just die. Wild plants can be like that too. That's part of it, is just trying to get people to enjoy, be able to enjoy areas and help manage it. And the other bit is, this is more involved with like cities and areas where there's a lot more people. Part of our responsibilities can include like, so community engagement can include, around here we've got like a lot of places that do waterwise management. Sometimes we go and source plants for them. Sometimes we go and identify plants for them. We help identify plants. We help plant plants. We help suggest plants for some nurseries to carry. I've done that before. We also can give people ideas of what to plant in their yards. The other bit is that we can provide information about trails in the area, and what kind of plants you can expect to see on the trail. Some people really love going to trails that have gorgeous, gorgeous wildflowers, even if, they may not be like the best plants. They may be invasive plants. Sometimes they're really pretty. And it can get people excited about like, oh, wow, I didn't realize pretty plants can be invasive. I didn't realize that could happen. And that's another way of, I like to, bring it all back around to curing plant blindness. We want to make sure that people are getting some engagement and some information out of the work we do. We can also help cities plant what kind of trees are good. I know a lot of cities around here really love planting Callery pears or Bradford pears. I'm going to, put my controversial opinion on here and say they're trash trees. They're not good for like our climate. They're not good for, they smell really, really bad and they make a big mess. I don't recommend them. I recommend other plants. There's a lot of other cool trees. We can't really plant maples here because they don't get enough iron in our soils. But you can have, we're lucky we can plant lilacs. Lilacs do really well here. But these are the kind of information I can give to like people I know or like recommend to gardeners that are asking questions on like Facebook, or people that email me and are like, hey, what can I plant in my yard? And that's how we can get people excited about plants. It's just providing information that's there. And getting it to just people locally. It's a lot of fun. I love doing it. I love doing plant walks. If you guys are interested, hit me up. I'd love to do one. But yeah, so that's part of our responsibilities too. So next bit, I am going to talk about, if it'll click, there we go. I'm going to talk about some of the ecosystems we see. So like I said, determining the health of an ecosystem is really important. Helps us manage a lot of things. In this case, we use in all cases, we use plants to fill in those gaps and fill in the missing puzzle pieces of what's going on. So I just want you guys to examine the foreground and the background of this photo. Foreground being in front of the sign and the background being just behind the sign. And just kind of notice the differences between them. Behind the sign, you see a lot of trees. You guys might recognize them. They're called aspens. And then you've got a couple of junipers. You've got like Juniperus osteosperma. You've got common juniper here. That's just kind of like low and shrubby. And then you've got like a mixed conifer back in here. So this location is you guys might recognize this location too. I think it might actually say in the sign. It's Pando in Fish Lake National Forest in Utah. This place is super cool. But I just want you guys, before I start giving more information, just examine I want you guys to ask yourself some questions when you see this. You can say, oh, why are there like certain patches of aspen here? Why are there patches? Why isn't it all just uniform? Why is sagebrush only down here instead of up there? Why are there certain types of grasses here instead of up there? These kind of questions. So think about that for a second. Write them down, make a mental note. Either way, it's cool. But I'm going to go ahead and hop into it. You can pause it right here and write some stuff down if you want. So what we're looking at here, like I said, we're looking at, a stand of aspen. So Pando is considered one of the largest living organisms in the world. It's in the running for a fungus and the blue whale, and a couple of other organisms. I like to say Panda's the biggest, but unfortunately it's kind of it's coming out of the running because it's currently dying because of a lot of issues that it's facing. I don't know if you guys can tell. It might be too small on your screens, but there are a lot of fallen aspens here. There are a lot of sick aspens. Aspens are characterized by their white bark that are they're just really gorgeous. They kind of have a powdery finish. The powder has been used as sunscreen before. It's kind of cool. I've used it in a pinch. But yeah, so you can see back here, this is an aspen, a dead aspen. And there's all these fallen aspens too. And that's because there's a fungal rot that's going around and killing things. There's also the issue of overgrazing this area. I shouldn't say behind, but near the bottom of the photo, towards us, it's really flat and just there's a lot of cheatgrass in there. There's a lot of invasive forbs, which are just kind of biennial plants. So they're just white top and there's some kind of nasty plants that don't do, or thistle. There's a lot of thistle that grows there. And that can be part of the degradation of the land due to mismanagement, or not even mismanagement, but just a lot of disturbance in this area. It's a really popular place to go hike. And because panda is the largest organism, everything spreads really easily. And that's why you've got these trails and pockets of aspen, is because they're all connected. They send up like these underground roots and just kind of go everywhere. It's kind of cool. So that's just kind of an idea of what we're looking at, and kind of the questions that we're asking are, let's do the foreground now, I guess. That is, it's all just sagebrush, and there's some, grasses in there. So why are these here instead of up there? Well, primarily it's because these guys need a lot more sun than these, and they don't get enough sun underneath this canopy, so they're not growing. There's also like more traffic down here. That's why you see like there's like a trail over there. You can kind of see like grass growing in that section right here. It's just, there's a lot of different reasons for it. So I'm going to go to the next picture because I think it's going to be a little bit more interesting. I want you guys to just kind of look at this. I know it's pretty blurry. I took it from a moving car. It's down near Green River in Utah. I want to say it's like right off I-70. Like I said, it was in a moving car, so I tried to take a picture because I thought it was really interesting. So I would pause this video, just kind of know what you notice and see, compare the differences between, the background, the foreground, everything around it, and then we can continue in just a sec. So this is Xerox sagebrush / Colorado Plateau sagebrush complex. And there are various different kinds of species in here. So it looks like we've got some Indian racegrass right here. We've got some Russian thistle right here next to here. We have got some tamarisk back here. We've got rabbit brush, sagebrush, all the good stuff. So when I drive by this, I would expect to see there is a body of water right there. That is a lot of tamarisk. And it's probably got a high amount of disturbance too, or high, like a perennial stream right there. So tamarisks love water. That's something that it will tell you. All I'll tell you is that it loves water and it's invasive in Utah. And then the rest of this is just a mix of various like shrubs. It's probably just majority sagebrush, rabbit brush, and saltbrush. That is probably just what it is. It's just complex. But as you move forward, you notice that this is just all grasses right here, and it kind of looks like it's in a straight line, right? So, one could argue that people probably pull off here and just kind of like wander a bit, because it wasn't like we weren't on the freeway, we were like on a small highway. You could probably argue somebody here like parks here and then like maybe goes off into the bushes to go have a quick bathroom break. And it's a pretty popular spot. There's also a lot of invasive species along the roadside, and that's just because, people carry stuff on their cars all over. Seeds and stuff get stuck onto tires or onto people's shoes, and then it drops next to the side of the road. So yeah, that tells us a little bit about that, and that's just like another piece of the puzzle. So you can determine from this that there's water. There's high disturbance because, well, primarily it's because we're next to a road. The other part is because there's a lot of thistle, Russian thistle, and there's like this weird blank patch. The other thing it could be too is that it's just like a slightly different soil type right there instead of like back there, and that's why things are growing here instead. There's a lot of reasons for this. You can just kind of like make educated guesses about the puzzle pieces. So the next one, this is an awesome photo. It kind of like brings everything together, and you can just kind of see how these different kind of communities come together and make a giant ecosystem. So like I said, this is the Green River. We're still kind of in this area. It's just like a lookout point. I think it's off of I-70. There's the Green River, and then you can see like there's green, there's, some bodies of water. So we can determine from this, because it's a river, you'd expect to see like a lot of green along the shoreline, but we don't. And that could be because there's a lot of disturbance there. Nothing will really grow. It could be because it's the middle of summer and nothing's growing there because it all died because it's not really protected. You do see some juniper kind of growing through here. And there's probably some tamarisks like further down, it looks like over here. Up here, you could probably, because it's just kind of a standing pool and we've got really like salty and basic soils, there's probably a lot of salt-loving plants here and here. And that's why it's just kind of barren, because there's nothing really growing there. It's too salty, so there's only specific kinds of plants that will grow there. And over here, it's just like super, super lush and green, probably because it's, pretty wet over there. Well-drained soils. And then you see like this red. There's like all this red that's coming up and around. And it's probably halogeton. It's like weedy It's a kind of succulent-y plant. It just kind of takes over everything. It kind of likes, our soils a lot, especially if they're a little saltier. It's a salt-loving plant. And then as you go in, you can tell that like nothing up here is like growing because it's the middle of summer and this is all like white rock. So nothing's going to grow really well. You can also see like these little canyons, and they have a lot of plant matter in there. And they're going to vary from this stuff out here because there's different soil, there's a different microclimate in there. And then you move over here where there's like these big mesas, and you're also going to have you're going to have different plants there because of different soils, different like light requirements, things like that. So in summation, it's just looking at all of these different puzzle pieces and learning where things are. Here you're going to find rushes. Maybe in the slot canyons, you're going to find some native ferns, which are so cool to find. Over here, you're going to find some salt-loving plants. You might find some halogeton or, something crazy in here. Probably some kind of invasive species because there's a lot of plants that are the same color right here. And you might find kind of normal roadside plants down here that we can't really see because it's too far up. Or there might not be any there because there's a road. So it's just looking at this, like I said, and finding pieces of the puzzle and learning how to read the land around you. I like the goal of this presentation is just to give you guys an idea of how to start seeing patterns in everyday things, how to start asking these questions, what kind of things to start noticing. If you're wondering, well, why is this plant here instead of somewhere else? Why do I have why does my neighbor have this plant and I have this plant? And we both have different weeds, but we live right next to each other. Why is that happening? Why is it when I go on this specific trail, I only see this one plant here, but I don't see it anywhere else. It's not off the trail. It's just like right on the side of the trail. I just want you guys to start like writing these things down, start, putting down like things that you notice and come up with some questions. Just think about like what kids would ask. Kids always ask, why is the sky blue? Why is this plant yellow? Why? Things like that. Just write them down. Don't be ashamed or freaked out about it. Like I do it all the time. And I come up with some really good questions. It just takes time and practice. So, in summation, let me go on to the next slide. I just want to say thank you guys for watching this. I really hope it gave you an idea of kind of what I do in my not day-to-day life, but in my professional life, and how it affects our communities, how it can help you out, what kind of resources could be available to you if you are interested in learning more. I am planning on doing some more videos. The next one I'm planning on doing is about plant identification using keys. And I'll be creating a key for you guys using just, plants that you can find in your yard, like weeds that you don't know what they are. So hopefully I will see you guys soon. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, feedback, you want to book me for a plant hike, feel free to give me an email at the abbotbotanical@gmail.com. That's listed below. And I'd be happy to help you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.